What is up, everybody? Solomon here. Super excited to be with Genfinity, interviewing a multitude of builders across Web3. We're back with another XDC show. We're going to be diving deep into RWA's real-world adoption, the accelerator, how it takes a village to really make an impact and bridging the gap between Web3 and Web2. Really excited to have Ivo with us up here today from Credify. These guys recently announced a partnership alongside the XDC ecosystem, and Lance, ecosystem development manager with the XDC Foundation as well. I always start these out with intros. Ivo, you're the guest of honor today, so if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, that'd be great.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for everybody joining in and listening to us. Thanks, Franz, for the invite. My name is Ivo Grigorov. I'm co-founder and CEO of Credify. I have personally been in the traditional financial sphere for the past 12 years now. Back in 2020, the idea of Credify came up. We thought that, this whole financial bureaucracy and the system, how it's done currently, doesn't really work. It's not like, there needs to be a technological advancement. Like there needs to be a change in how people can access and actually finance different and trade different financial instruments, especially debt ones. And that's how we came up with Credify. We thought that blockchain is the best way to do it. It gives all the necessary, let's say, technological possibilities to do it. That's how we ended up here.
I still mute my mic after 200 some of these. Lance, if you could give us an intro of yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do within the XDC Foundation and the ecosystem, that'd be great.
Yeah, thanks for having me here again, man. It's always a pleasure to meet with you and talk with you. We've had some good ones on here, man. They're always fun. My name is Lance, ecosystem development at XDC Foundation. My role, is flexible, I guess you could say, right? I mean, there's always kind of something that needs to get done. Certain projects. Lately, it's been the Plug and Play Accelerator Program. We've had a lot of projects that are involved with this, so you can imagine there's a lot of work to be done to, make this program successful. Working with a lot of cool projects. That on top of my other, regular duties that I try to do within the foundation. So, it's like onboarding projects, trying to find like new integrations maybe that we need within the XDC network, or a specific ecosystem participant, or something that we're really needing within the ecosystem. Putting a program together or putting something in place to try to make that happen is something that I do a lot of. So good to be here. And Ivo, it's good to see you, and looking forward to talking more about Credify and the whole landscape in general.
I think sure. As we kick off here, it'd be cool to maybe touch base on the accelerator, Lance, and where that's at as far as the progress is concerned. I know Credify taking part in that as well. I'm assuming, and maybe I'm not correct here, that's kind of where the relationship developed. So, I mean, maybe we get into the weeds there and then expand out. So if you could tell us a little bit about Lance, I mean, we'll start with you.
Okay.
Where are we at with the RWA Accelerator? And I guess really the question is, like, you were talking about this beforehand, there's a lot of lessons learned whenever you bring together multiple different portions of technology to really try to like move the needle as far as real world adoption is concerned. And you've basically said it takes a lot of different specialists to be able to really make change. So Lance, tell us where we're at right now and some of the lessons, and then we'll open it up for Ivo here.
Okay. Yeah. I like, what you say about that. I mean, we obviously knew and know there's a lot involved to make any type of project that's building in Web3 or building with blockchain successful, especially when you're trying to bridge this DeFi and TradFi or trade finance, if you will, right? And you look at like hackathons even too, like hackathons I really enjoy doing because you get to meet developers and you find out like what are they having a hard time with, right? What is successful to them? What are things that they need? And you figure things out, and it helps you make developers more successful. And then something like an accelerator program, you get to meet and work with projects that are doing something a little different from each other. You know, they're working in RWAs, they're working in borrowing and lending or whatever that is, right? Or trade finance, but they're trying to bridge it with this TradFi or traditional, industry, and learning what maybe is working for them, what's not working for them, like what is it that's missing to make them more successful. And it's different for sort of each project. And Evo, we were talking about this beforehand. When you're trying to bring like a lender or an asset manager or someone from a traditional industry in to Web3 or blockchain, it's easier to make that more successful when you have a lot of the other pieces already in place versus if you were just a project. You got a platform, it's like, okay, you got a platform, but do you have KYC stuff? And I know we're going to get into this, what blockchain you're going to use. Like there's a lot of other things that are involved, so it's easier you have a better chance of making it more successful when you have more of the pieces in place. And for the program that we're in right now, it's coming to a close. We're about to wrap the program up, and I know Evo, you'll touch on this a little bit too. But and we're already in the beginning stages of getting the second program going. So there's a lot of good information I think that'll be coming out regarding the first program and everything wrapping up with that. But what I was just talking about like you said, it takes a village somewhat, right? And discovering all those other things that are needed to make this successful is something that I want to hear from today too, from Evo.
Yeah. I guess, first of all, it's great to bring like-minded people together, right? So, I mean, everybody is actually, building something. There's a lot of projects out there. There's a lot of noise out there. Sometimes, unfortunately, the noise is basically not really contributing to the overall ecosystem or growth. But sometimes, you have to pick up basically the cherries, and such kind of a program where you bring together, let's say, at least in my opinion, some of the best and most recognizable, let's say, projects within the space, it gives the chance for them to integrate together. Everybody is speaking about interoperability, but to be honest, like quite a few people are doing it. So canceling out all this unnecessary noise, and in the meantime, bringing such people together. Everybody is doing separate things, but let's say in the same direction. So, for example, right now, like in the accelerator program, everybody is speaking of bridging the traditional financial, let's say, sphere together with the DeFi, but in a different manner, right? So you have people who are doing it let's say in trade finance. You have people who are doing it in debt financing. Credify, for example, we're specializing in debt financing in financial instruments. That's where our core expertise lies in, right? So we have been designing such kind of financial instruments before for banks and funds, let's say. Right now, we're trying to do it for everybody, and it's easily accessible through the blockchain. It's without regional boundaries. It's without time. Like the time efficiency is much better. But then again, like we do need, as you said, like we do need other parts as well. Oracles, data. We need KYC providers, etc., etc. So bringing different stakeholders within this system together is definitely beneficial, and we were very happy, to be honest, to be selected into the program and to be part of it. I think the selection process was quite picky. So thanks once again for choosing Credify.
Yeah, try to be picky.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, you guys, I think we're at an interesting kind of point in the adoption of blockchain, distributed ledger, crypto, where like over the past 12 to 18 months, we've seen definitely more real world adoption and like big announcements than we've ever seen in this space since 2009. And yet, like, when you really get into the weeds, you still realize how much work is needed to be done to really like, make impact in the traditional financial landscape. like, and you guys bring up an interesting point. Like, if you look at some of these like entities out there that are going to, it's like a matter of like when, not if they're going to integrate blockchain and distributed ledger. They have like these just behemoth bureaucracies with like tons of different divisions, whether it's from the regulatory stance or whether it's from the financing stance or whether it's from KYC and AML, whatever it is. And really, I think that that's kind of what we're alluding to here is like, it's going to take basically the same amount of collaboration with Web3 players as exists kind of in these kind of Web2 behemoths to really make change, because, you know, if we're going to have adoption, we need to basically be on par with kind of the infrastructure that some of these companies have. And just, I think it's an interesting point.
No, if I might add to it, I mean, you know, these systems were built over years and years, right? We're building it in a light speed compared to them, to be honest. Think about it, like, you know, some of these systems, like, you know, banks, etc., they're like, you know, 250-year-old institutions. Like, we're doing it in less than 10 years. Like, I mean, the technological advancement and the leap here is insane. And to be honest, we are, from where we started, you know, the initial start of blockchain with Bitcoin and etc., we have gone ages. Like, I have said that, you know, before in different meetings, like, in our space, let's say a week is like a year for the rest of the world, you know, like things are changing so fast. And I do think that we have evolved much, much more than back in 2020. I think that right now is probably one of the busiest and most, let's say, crucial times for the space, especially when it comes to RWA. Because in my personal opinion, like, I have always stated that even when we started, like, back 4 years ago, around 4 years ago, we do need to integrate with the real world economy in order to actually make an impact and to get to, like, this massive adoption, which everybody is saying. So you do need to interact, but in a way which gives, like, only benefits, basically. As you said, there's bureaucracies, there's like these integrations, etc. But with us, the beautiful thing is we're flexible. Like, you know, Web3 companies are, most of us are startups. We're flexible, full of energy, you know, young people who are willing to make a change. And that's how the internet started. That's how Amazon started. And all of these, you know, big institutions out there right now, that's how they started.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, my thoughts have been that way for a while, right? That like the main reason I think this was all going to work and is working isn't necessarily just because blockchain's faster and 24/7 and all that kind of stuff, right? But like all of the energy, talent, hunger, you know, to build something great isn't in traditional fintech or, you know, traditional finance. It's here, right? So like all the innovative stuff and innovative thinkers and innovative developers and innovative, you know, business people, I guess, right? Like they're in this industry. So like it was only a matter of time before it got to a place where traditional finance, like, okay, yeah, we need to hop onto this. And I would argue, and I think it's pretty known too, it's not like it's an insight or anything, but I think everything could have moved even faster, but it was just, there was a lot of regulatory uncertainty, you know, there was a lot of barriers, you know, involved, stuff like that. Things were fluctuating, you know, so much in this industry. So I would say it's really just been like the past, you know, few years or so, 4 years maybe, that like things have actually really started to try to, okay, we're really, really, really moving forward with this. So things have moved faster even than that, I think.
For sure. I think it was Andre Casterman, who we've brought on a bunch of times, Lance, that mentioned that, you know, and he has a background from, you know, years at like Swift, within like the Swift system. So like financial messaging, all that stuff. And he was mentioning that like the traditional systems are basically like decades of Band-Aids, like a Band-Aid on top of a Band-Aid on top of a Band-Aid on top of a Band-Aid. So it's really interesting. And you know, maybe we do get into that just briefly, Lance, as far as like, you know, your guys' thoughts on regulatory compliance and the landscape there, and the, you know, the effort that it really takes to operate compliantly, because every jurisdiction is different in different regards, and what that experience has kind of been like, and where there's more leeway as far as being able to do certain things in certain jurisdictions, but other jurisdictions there's maybe more pain points that are going to take some more time. Maybe just briefly there, if we want to touch on it or not.
Yeah, and I'll touch on it real quick, but Evo's probably got more to say on this than I do. But I think now the climate, I guess you could say, is more friendly, obviously, to blockchain and stuff like that. But I've always said too, it depends on what you're doing in Web3, on what sort of compliance you need to really think about. But if you're following a lot of the traditional finance compliance stuff, your KYC, AML, within your jurisdiction, what the regulatory landscape is within that, you'll probably be okay. But of course, there is some uncertainty there, obviously, But I think it's a lot friendlier now than it ever has been, obviously. But I think really to make this thing take off to where it needs to go, or to where it can go, there needs to be more compliance, regulation, the roadmap, I guess you will, for that. If on like wallets, liability, and I've talked about this like all the time, it seems like every show, right? Like is a wallet signature legally binding? Is it as good as a hand signature? Like, I think things like this are things that really need to be ironed out if we really want like secondary markets to take off like we want them to, and DeFi to be more like TradFi. And there's other stuff that we need to kind of get ironed out too, besides what I just said. But I still think there's a lot that needs to happen to really make this thing get to where we want it to go. But I know, Evo, you work in this more than I do specifically, right? So you probably have something more to touch on this than I do.
Yeah, no, to be honest, I have stated that, and it's probably rather unpopular opinion at some, like in some spaces, but I do like regulation, to be honest. Like I like guidelines, because that way at least you can keep safe, right? So you need to have like, the right guidelines, and also in the other way, what is also beneficial is that it kind of cancels out like, all of these noise, which I was saying before, because as I said, like if you're a serious company, you do need to have some kind of regulation, right? And I do think that right now, not only that it's more favorable, but people actually started paying attention to our sphere, because I think back, let's say like 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, nobody was paying attention to blockchain as a whole. Like people weren't taking us seriously, let's say, and they just didn't recognize the potential. But again, this has happened with internet. It has happened with tons of other industries as well. So I think the delay on the regulation side and on the guidelines, etc., came from the fact that people were just not taking us too serious, right? Right now, we have proven that, okay, this is a space which is growing. It's something which people are using, they like, and they want to come on board. And basically, the governments are reacting to this, let's say,
to this change in demand.
To this
right?
demand. Yeah, to this demand. Like people, they have recognized that this is a space which is gonna stay and it's gonna grow, and it's something serious, right? So it's one more validation of the opportunities which we're having here, like within the whole ecosystem. At least that's my point of view. And I think that as regulations might be difficult, but they're not impossible. And if you come, especially when we speak about RWAs, TradFi, etc., I mean, it's logical that you need to have anti-money laundering systems, right? I mean, anyone who has ever worked in finance will know that this is something which is a must-have. Yet again, that doesn't mean that this decentralization is out of the question as soon as you put regulations or as you put KYC. I mean, the aspect of decentralization is not the fact that you're hiding your let's say face or your email. The whole aspect is that you have a saying into, let's say, companies or projects or whatever it is, like, or you can lend towards, let's say, users and SMEs, on the other side of the world without any, like, digital manner, in a question of, let's say, couple of seconds. That's what's probably one of the most beautiful aspects of blockchain, right? It's not hiding my wallet and my face, or the email which I'm using. This is not I don't think this is the major benefit out of the whole thing. So I do think that regulations to a certain extent are good, and they also help adoption. People are feeling safer when they think that okay, this is a company. That's why from the onset at Credify we have been doxxed. Like, the whole team is out there, and the company is registered in Lithuania, etc., etc.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting. Another kind of thing that we've seen ramp up more recently, and I know in crypto and blockchain DLT, we always talk about like account abstraction over the past like year or 2 years. I really think it's like, even like, we have to make the technology like stupid simple. Like, and we are getting to that point, I think, where Lance brings up a great point, where it's like, you talk to these real world companies and real world industry, and I'm sure they're asking, like, sometimes they're asking, we don't even know necessarily where to start. And it doesn't make it any better for that discussion whenever, it's like, we don't know where to start to impact our business, but we also don't know even how to create a wallet. Like, like and we are getting to that point where it's becoming much easier. I think we're seeing more and more traction around really making the technology simple. But yeah,
when you think about it, have you ever tried to open a corporate account at the bank?
That's what I tell my family that all the time. Like, my family, they're like, oh, I don't want to set up a wallet. I don't want to go through this process of saving the key and all that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, but when you open a bank account and set up your online banking, like, that is more steps and harder to do than setting up a wallet. You know what I mean?
It takes days to do it, So I think it's just, some people were probably scared, but right now, like, people are getting, as I said, like, they're starting to pay a bit more attention. Like, even older generations are getting into the space. Like, I have personally had like personal contacts who are like, okay, this is interesting. Like, it's not like 5 years ago, everybody was like, what? Blockchain? Come on, you're in finance, you shouldn't go there.
Yeah.
So I think you guys both bring up an interesting point. And I know from like through the XDC lens, there's been just tons of infrastructure built from the trade finance landscape, with all the verticals that we've talked about, whether it's KYC and AML or digital documentation or financing or whatever portion of kind of the trade finance life cycle is taking place. I'm curious from your stance, Ivo, the same thing from like the debt financing standpoint. Like, can you maybe touch base a little bit on like where you guys think we're headed towards? And Ivo, you touched on it, where it's like you can finance from across the world in a debt financing transaction. And same thing in the trade finance landscape. And that is really what blockchain opens up. But I would love maybe your guys' take on what's the world going to look like in 10 years for participating in these different kind of financing transactions, like from just people out there globally. What's the shift that we're going to see, like in a decade or so?
Lance, you want to go first?
Well, I can say like where I hope it goes and where I want it to go. Man, I have to like be careful what I say here sometimes, because sometimes may upset some people maybe, but I hope it is more, decentralized and sovereign in a sense, right? I mean, some people get so happy sometimes when certain names come into the industry, and and greed is a thing too, right? Like, some people are willing to be excited about big names or something coming into a specific part of the industry if it means they're going to make some money or whatever that is, right? But I think like in the long run, and what this is supposed to do is it's supposed to, democratize, liberate sovereignty to finance and trade. It's supposed to make things more accessible, and not just accessible from a user standpoint, but accessible from a business standpoint and a participant standpoint, right? Like, I in trade and trade finance specifically, we want small to medium-sized enterprise and the little guy to be able to come in and participate and compete. And it needs to be easily accessible, and onboarding needs to be easier. And I think like we are getting there, because I think the onboarding and getting into this stuff isn't as, it's difficult. That's not difficult. I think there's just a little bit of uncertainty with it, but it's easier now for sure than it was a few years ago. But I always tell people too, and even if they're a little guy, like, stop thinking of blockchain and RWA as the business, right? It's just the tool. Your business and everything's still the same. Think of your whole business. You're just bringing one aspect into it, and that one aspect is just going to open you up to a whole new world of possibilities and opportunities. So think of it like that. And I think we will in 10 years. Like, I think we will, because Evo mentioned this a little earlier. Like, it's just getting faster and faster and faster. And that's been a good thing about some of the bigger names coming into the industry is, one, it's legitimizing the industry. It's creating more trust in the industry, but it's also speeding up the adoption and progress technologically of the industry as well. So there's been a lot of good that's come from it. But I think in 10 years, we'll be pretty close, to where like we really have envisioned all this to be. And I think if the onboarding is easier and it's accessible like we want it to be, then I think it'll get there the way that we want it to be.
Yeah. My personal opinion is that I don't know. We are at the cross point of I like to give this example of the email and fax. At certain point, like, people were using both in the beginning, but it's basically either you evolve and you basically go interact with the possibilities of the new kind of like agent world, or you just become extinct kind of thing. So I do think that the big names are putting a lot of resources into actually understanding the possibilities and opportunities, and they are starting to utilize them. I think that most people who are refusing, let's say, to accept the new reality will kind of shift away from the business, let's say, because, as I said, like, from, let's say, debt financing instruments standpoint, when we're designing them, the first thing is, right, okay, how do you place them, right? To who are you gonna sell? Would be interested, etc., etc. Having regional constrictions is a big issue, right? So if I, let's say, want to finance, let's say, a building or a construction company somewhere in Europe, and how do I do it? I can't. I need to go to the bank. I need to go to an intermediary. I need to go to, let's say, brokerage companies, etc., etc. It's a nightmare. I mean, the best I can do is keep some money in some bank, and then the bank decides which construction company they're gonna be financing. They decide at what percentage points they're gonna be financing, and I'm left with on my money and my assets, I'm left with something which they have total control over, right? So, and I cannot, let's say, send money to Sri Lanka for some, big opportunity. I mean, the average person, right? You cannot do it.
Yeah.
And with us, and that's what essentially Credify is all about. You can.
Yeah.
And here's globalization at its finest point, right? And decentralization at its finest point. You choose what you want to finance. You choose where your money is going. You choose at what interest rate. And okay, we are giving the traditional financial tools. We are saying, okay, there is a probability of default. We are also working with Experian for our scoring mechanisms and credit assessments. But at the end of the day, like, people and institutions, whether small, big, doesn't matter. They're choosing where and what they want to finance and at what risk level, etc. And I think that's beautiful. Like, you're giving, as once put it a while back, like, you're kind of giving the little guy a chance, like a fighting chance. And however, when there is a lot of little guys, they become one big, massive crowd, right? And that's what's going to happen with blockchain. And that's what's going to happen with finance. Like, Look at Robinhood. What did they do? They just gave access to people who are basically willing to invest in stocks, right? Without
Yep.
going to the brokerage,
Yep.
without going to the investment bank. Look how successful they were. Like Revolut as well. It's ours is basically the next technological and logical step.
Yep. Yeah, I think one of the mistakes that big names make really in any industry is they're looking at the competition that they currently have, right, as like their competition. And I'm sure they're, smart ones are always looking at what's kind of up and coming and what's hot, right? But it's never necessarily someone that you're competing with right now that takes you out. It's something new and emerging, that takes you out, and like I think the smart ones saw that early and realized that. But I guess what I'm looking at now is like it's always a name that we don't necessarily know that ends up becoming the top dog, So we probably don't know who these next big players are. They're probably starting up, right now. But yeah, more competition also in the world that you're talking about.
Well, and I remember even going back to like 2020 doing like a bunch of deep dives into this space, and I want to say, like, not to get too deep into the world of like tokens or anything, but like you could go to CoinGecko in 2020 and I think there was maybe 10 or 12,000 tokens, but you could really filter it out by like the first 5 or 6 pages on CoinGecko and look at like metrics like volume and things like that. You go to those sites now and it's like, I think it's like 10 or 12 million or something.
Yeah.
which is stupid. But I think it comes down to the point of like just really enacting like, the real world kind of adoption that we see. There's so much noise out there, but I think it is boots on the ground. Actually getting into the discussions with some of these real world companies, figuring out their pain points, and then injecting like a really maybe not sexy, but just a solution that works and makes their processes either cheaper or, whatever it is to actually solve a problem.
Yeah. I think this is a good.
Sorry, Lance, if you want to go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say, we haven't really even had an opportunity yet to really cover like Credify, Evo, really like what you guys are doing. And you've been able to touch on it throughout our conversation because what you guys are doing plugs right into what our discussion is. So I was just going to give you sort of an opportunity of like, what made you guys want to start Credify, right? Like what's your ultimate goal? What is it that you guys are hoping to accomplish and give a little overview of Credify?
Basically, yeah, I did touch upon it. Like, I have always said, like, you don't need to invent, like, the light bulb, right? I mean, you just need to figure out a way how to do things better and how to
make it more accessible.
Make it more accessible to users and, easier, user-friendly, etc., etc. So what we do at Credify, well, technically speaking, we're offering all of the traditional, let's say, methods and expertise we have basically on chain in terms of investing or lending out to borrowers, investing in different financial, let's say, debt instruments, such as, corporate bonds or lending out towards SMEs who are actual companies who are with cash flow. There is the risk assessment analysis, which we're performing, as I mentioned. You have the probability of default, etc., etc. So basically what we do is we offer freedom for people to generate passive income especially in form of debt. So you have interest rate, which you can be getting, and basically lending out your money and your assets at the best possible manner. Right now, we are also just about to release our new platform version, which has a couple of new services. So we have autonomous earning, which is basically a pool where you can lend out your assets, your digital assets, such as USDC, etc., and to receive interest on it, APY, as people prefer to say, to refer to it. Then you have the peer-to-peer section, which people will be able to choose different projects, different companies which they want to directly lend out to at different, let's say, interest rates, etc. Again, with a full bio, with a full due diligence, full risk assessment included already. So, a lot of interesting. And at the end of the day, we are trying to provide this, as I said, accessibility to both retail and institutional lenders and borrowers to interact with each other globally and actually be able to leverage on their assets. For example, when we speak about tokenized assets, one of the things which we're focusing right now on, and which will be possible on the new platform version, is to actually use your tokenized assets as collateral. So, this is something, here is a big, let's say, interoperability, which people are referring to, but they're still, like, how do I do it, right? Okay, you have a tokenization company, you have a tokenized asset. Why not leverage on it? Why do you need to only hold it, right? You can generate interest income on it, passive income, etc., etc. All of the possibilities which you can do within traditional financial sphere, we're trying to bring it on chain. However, we don't need you to be like a millionaire to access it.
Yeah.
you can go as small as $100 or $1 million. It's basically it's up to you.
I think like that's what is going to need to happen, to really make RWAs take off, is like what you're talking about, doing more with it. And I think like I always think about too, whenever the United States had like stimulus packages and the governments like to put out money into the economy to try to stimulate the economy, and it's like, I know for sure so much of that money was a waste, so much of that money was a waste. And it's like, I think more stimulation to the economy can happen if you just make money more accessible to people, like what you guys are doing. You know what I mean? I think that alone is going to stimulate
when you
economies.
Making tokenization of RWAs and making illiquid assets liquid, and then being able to do all sorts of things with them, like collateralize them and everything else. Like, there's a reason that I'm paying $10 for a dozen of eggs now, and then 5 years ago I was paying $2, because like they're just throwing money out into the economy that doesn't exist. Like, but no, I think
no.
Yeah, go ahead, Ivo.
Sorry, no, I just wanted to add on to what Vance was saying. Like, first rule of finance, right? Maximize profits, minimize costs, etc. Like, basically, that's what we're all here for, right? And people, they can utilize this. Like, why would I put my money into the bank, which is offering me 0.5% interest rate, right? When I can put it, let's say, somewhere in Shanghai, and I can be generating 18% income, right? Like 18% interest. Why not? Because, okay, if you don't have companies such as, let's say, Credify or XDC and blockchain as a whole, it was so much difficult. Now it's not. People just need to learn how to utilize it, right? And I think that this is also one of the reasons why the big names are coming on board, is that they have realized, okay, we can tokenize some of our assets. We can actually trade them cheaper. We can, you don't need to basically look at the opening hours of the New York Stock Exchange or the Toronto Stock Exchange. Here, the market is open 24/7 anywhere in the world.
Yep.
We've talked about that before too, Lance, that there's a reason the NASDAQ is, going 24/7, and maybe it already is. And that, I think that announcement was like 3 months ago. There's been so many traditional industries directly impacted by blockchain and distributed ledger. And like, yeah, they don't mention that that's why they're going 24/7, but that's 1,000% why they're going 24/7, because they need to stay on par before they basically become irrelevant. I don't know how much, go ahead, Ivo.
Sorry, no, I just wanted to add on to what you were saying, like on par, but then, like, who has access to NASDAQ, right? So right now, anybody with MetaMask, they can do a lot of things. They just, need to realize how to utilize it in the best possible manner.
Yeah, I want people to learn how to actually use that. And I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here sometimes. I feel like I say it every show, right? But it's like people need to learn how to use this stuff that way, like through the MetaMask route, and not just. I mean, there's other ways that are single sign-on, Web3 auth type stuff, or maybe account abstraction. There's a couple ways to tackle this beast, I guess, if you will, right? But like, I think it's important for people to really learn the traditional crypto way, right? Because that is what's going to give you your real sovereignty, over your assets. Like your money, your value, yourself, your identity, etc., right, is doing things that way. And I just like, man, if everybody just learned how to do it that way and understood what it actually means to be able to do things that way, everybody would demand it. You know what I mean? Because it's giving you more control. Not everybody probably, but like it gives you more control over your assets and your money. But
actually,
go ahead, Ivo.
No, sorry, please go ahead because I interrupted you like twice already. Sorry.
No.
All good, man.
Yeah, continue on your thought process from Lance, and then I was going to ask you guys about the relationship here, the XDC and Credify, and what that's been like, and maybe what we can potentially expect, because there's been some teasers out there. Not forcing you guys to drop anything live during this, certainly, but just maybe a broad strokes on what the relationship's like.
Go ahead, Ivo.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Basically, yeah, I mean, when you are trying to find the best possible way to offer, let's say, products and services, etc., you also want to have the best possible infrastructure out there to kind of like offer it, right? So we did start the relationship to a certain extent through the accelerator, but then again, like we did have some discussions. We started looking at the possible synergies and integrating. And yeah, at the end of the day, as I said, we are revamping. Credify is revamping its whole platform. So it was a great, let's say, coincidence here in terms of our roadmap. And yeah, right now, most of our features, not to say all of them, but like 99% of it are going to be pretty soon accessible through XDC as well.
Yep. That's Ivo. Yeah, I mentioned it. So integration, with the XDC network, and it's good too because as we've said before, it takes more of a village, I guess, if you will, right? Like having Credify and what they do, and XDC network and our ecosystem of participants, right? And that's like I feel like that's the benefit. If I'm on the outside looking in, if I'm a project coming into the accelerator program, and XDC network specifically, and I mentioned this quite a bit, right, is like one of the good things about building on XDC is that you get access to the whole ecosystem, right? Like you got XDC Foundation, you got Zenfin, you got other participants, right, that are willing to try to help fill gaps of, let's say, even Credify, right? Whether that's finding a KYC, AML, some service provider within our ecosystem, or custodian within our ecosystem, or something else, or Oracle, whatever that is, right? And trying to get everybody to work together versus maybe some other ecosystems, you don't have as much access to the actual core teams that are building within that ecosystem. You try to help get access to everything, right? And with XDC, you get that.
Yeah, you're kind of like left on your own, but yeah, with XDC, it has been a great experience so far. And we're really excited that, we will have this opportunity to actually continue working together and release some cool stuff onto it.
Yeah,
awesome. That's really cool. Yeah, I think it's been it's always interesting to me to kind of see when there are kind of partnerships that make sense in this space, because from my experience, like I've talked to so many people, like a lot of projects they're like, people are always interested to work together, but everybody is like so focused on trying to build out their own application, their own platform. And it's like, unless it like is a fit and there's like pain points solved, and there's like something that just makes sense as a use case, or something that makes sense as an integration point, even people or even projects that are like open to working together just don't have the bandwidth to do it. So I think that, it's really cool to see this stuff come to fruition. Lance, I'm going to kind of ask, the boilerplate, forward-looking statements here, what you guys are excited about for the state of the industry, what you guys are excited about for the RWA Accelerator, this one ramping down and the next one ramping up. Maybe I'll start with you, Lance, wherever you want to take it.
Yeah. No, I mean, as I said, it's been exciting, working in this accelerator program. The way that I've looked at it is you get to really uncover, what is it that a lot of these projects need to be successful, right? And I'm sure, Ivo, you can even touch on this too, right? Like every project has got something, that they need maybe either more resources to make happen, or, they don't have somebody on their team that can fill that gap, or they don't have somebody within the cog of the wheel that to make their project successful that they need to come plug it in. And that's what the accelerator program has helped identify and also uncover, and then also the problem that it's helping like fix, right? So I think there's been like a few things that we've learned from the program too that I think will move into the second program coming up. But I think like projects like Credify, for instance, we've identified some of the things that we together should maybe try to focus on or bring in to make Credify, more successful. And then in turn, if Credify is more successful, it makes XDC more successful, right? Because it's bringing on more users to the network. So it's like, it's a win-win for both. And I think like that's the interesting opportunity for this kind of industry, I think, right? Is because there's so many winners that can work together that they're not competitors necessarily. You know what I mean? And them working together makes the odds of success, higher. So, trying to bring in more lenders, maybe for Credify, how can we try to help them, make that happen, or somebody within our ecosystem to try to, work with them to make that happen. So, yeah, I think those are the exciting things.
I forget who I was talking to, and it might not even have been in an interview. It might have been like behind the scenes, but they brought up a really good point. And I think, you mentioned like the flywheel effect and like the feedback loops, like, synergy between projects. And I think the guy said, he's like, I truly believe in decentralization, and, these different industry participants working together, because and he said, this is his words, not mine. He's like, I would much rather have a little piece of a gigantic pie, like the global pie, than a gigantic piece of a really small pie. And I think that, I've seen a shift from all these people that I've talked to over the past year or so, specifically, where even the most reserved individuals from different networks and different ecosystems, I mean, they're saying publicly, like, everything's going to be tokenized. It's just a matter of time. And then it really comes down to like who's working together to solve particular pain points to kind of make that work for different, traditional industry participants. So I think it's really interesting. Ivo, I would love if you could walk us out forward-looking statements, what you're excited about. And yeah.
Well, there's a lot of that I'm excited about. I completely agree that, everything at some point is going to be tokenized. It's going to be on-chain. It's going to be completely transparent. People will be able to, see real-time data. Like, for example, I don't know, when we speak about credit assessment, right? We use quantitative and qualitative data based on, the borrower's behavior, et cetera, previous accounts, et cetera, right? All of these data points, like they are a pain to acquire. They are, difficult to, let's say, model out. You need to have tons of regressional models, empirical data, et cetera, right? At some point, like, such kind of obstacles, they'll be so much easily accessible. When everything is up on chain, everything is accessible. Basically, it would be, the name of the game would be who does it better, and just to put on Lance's, like to build on to Lance's point here, having these partnerships, having integrated with the right people, with the right partners, etc. We're still a fairly small sphere and industry. I don't view anybody as competitor, to be honest. We can, like, Credify can partner up pretty much with anybody. I mean, we wouldn't build on Solana, for example, because we're not in that sphere, and memes are something which, for example, we never touch. But still, like, the ecosystem is fairly small. We are all partners, and I think that we can only benefit from each other, and we can only supplement each other, complement each other. So yeah, I do think that in the near future, also I have like this theory. Sorry if I'm taking a bit too much.
No, you're great.
No, man, you go ahead.
I have this theory that like the biggest shipment of wealth is coming our way at some point. And what I mean by this is that there's gonna be this huge inheritance, let's say, wave coming up up in the next couple of years, and the younger generations are going to start to have more, let's say, assets, and they have like a different way of thinking, right? So for them, for example, to bring their house on chain and tokenize it, and perhaps leverage, not go and do a mortgage directly in the bank, but rather come to Credify and leverage the tokenized assets on their house through us. That's something which is a real possibility. So
no,
Yep.
I think all interesting points, and I think it'll be really interesting to kind of watch the shift that occurs. I thought this was an awesome podcast, Lance, and I'm going to ramp it down if you guys want to hang out with me for a second here to make sure I get the recordings. And thank you to Evo, and thank you to you, Lance, as well, for joining today.
Yep, for sure. Thanks for having me here. And
yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I think the discussions are like, we can go on for hours here, but
yeah, because I think there was a couple of things that came up that I wanted to really hit on more, but time for time's sake. But maybe we'll have to do this again sometime.
We could 1,000% schedule something back in here. I mean, I think, as Evo mentioned, I could easily go probably 2 hours, 2.5 hours with you guys, but I don't. We'll split it up. Let's do another one here, even in a few weeks.
Definitely, maybe when we release the platform, which is in the next days, and we can also give some examples, the real life ones as well.
Yeah,
how we do things with XDC, for example.
Lance, I didn't mention in this, do we have anything, and I know that you alluded to it to me before, but I'm sure we have maybe a couple more things lined up for this month as well, that maybe more podcasts, things like that. So
yeah, we do. I know we're going to have Andrea back on because there's some stuff that he's working on. I think there's a few developments that have happened since our last XDC show, and there's some exciting things coming too. And obviously the program wrapping up with Plug and Play, and then the next one starting up, here pretty soon. So yeah, we'll have a couple more shows to cover some ecosystem highlights over the last month, what's coming maybe in the next few months, and then we'll have Andrea on as well.
Awesome. Well, hang out with me for a second, guys. I'm going to ramp this one down, and I appreciate both of your time today. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.